know what it is that you want to do. Have a list of kind of like, well, what are the tasks? And, be sensible about how quick you can onboard some of these things. Because some of it's going to be your own capacity to take questions, to explain it, to do the Loom videos like you talked about. So anything that you can do in advance so that when they start, they've got stuff to be just digging into, right? So for instance, you record a bunch of Loom videos on how to do something. They can be creating the SOPs. They can watch you do them. They can start doing them for the first times.
Today's episode is brought to you by Tailwind. If you want to use Pinterest, Tailwind is not optional. They are the official partner of Pinterest and the only scheduler that actively protects your Pinterest account. That's right. They'll stop you from making mistakes like posting the same pin too many times or posting too frequently. I use Tailwind, and you should too. Check them out. Swordmaster.com/Tailwind.
Are you tired of dealing with your boss? Do you feel underpaid and underappreciated? If you want to make it online, fire your boss and start living your retirement dreams now, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to Serve No Master Podcast, where you'll learn how to open new revenue streams and make money while you sleep. Presented live from a tropical island in the South Pacific by best-selling author Jonathan Green. Now, here's your host.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to an amazing episode of the Serve No Master Podcast. We have a very special guest today, Noel Andrews, and we're going to talk about the process of hiring, especially hiring your very first employee, because I know I made a lot of mistakes, and I'm sure we want to help you to avoid those mistakes. And so we're very special to have this amazing guest today. Noel, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Jonathan, no worries. Really, really good to be here.
So I'd like to just get right into it because I've been thinking about this a lot today. As you know, I've hired my entire staff. I've hired through your platform, and so I'm very familiar with it. And that's one of the ways we've become close over the years. And I've been through so much staff turnover, and I'd love to talk about maybe the mindset that someone should have before they make their first hire. One thing I've seen, at least, is that people often go, well, I want someone to do my social media, but they don't have more of a definition. They don't really know what they want someone to do other than they want someone to do something good. So can you tell me a little bit about what someone should have in mind when they make their first hire and how they know it's time? When is the right moment?
So when is the right moment? Well, it's normally kind of a few months ago or a few years ago before you're hiring. Normally. So many of the people that we work with and kind of I spend my time hanging out with kind of are just like, oh, I wish I'd done that sooner. And I had that moment myself quite recently. So I finally hired my own executive assistant to actually help me with things. I've done it loads for kind of other people. I've done it loads for the business. But finally got someone helping me with my stuff, personal stuff, things like that. And again, I should have done it a lot earlier. In terms of the mindset, I think there's a big thing around just thinking about what you want, right? And what's most important for you, kind of what's most going to kind of make the difference. And it's important to think about this from a life perspective as well as a work perspective, right? So it's, we want to kind of work to live, not the other way around. And so definitely thinking, right, well, what do you want to actually enable? Is it all about the growth? Is it all about the hustle? Is it all about, kind of freeing up time? And then you can prioritize the things that are most important to kind of, get someone else to do, whether it's things that you don't know how to do or aren't good at, or whether it's things that, you just want to get off your own plate.
Okay, that's really wonderful. So if someone makes that decision, they go, okay, you know what? I want to get more of my time back. So I want to give someone the task to take the most of my time. They make that decision. How should they then approach the hiring process? What's the right way to start? Do they go right into posting it on social media? Do they go right to using a job platform? How do they write the job listing, which can be very challenging in a way that gets the right applicants? What's the best way to approach that?
Yeah, so first step is kind of think about specifically what they want to do, because that's going to inform where you go and look for the person. It's going to inform the platform that you use, how much you're going to need to pay, things like that. So I find, making a list of all the things that you're doing that's taking your time right now, and then kind of prioritizing those ones that you want to delegate or feel you can delegate. Generally, you might often, or business owners often think, oh, that's going to be too much work or it's going to be too hard to delegate. Generally, that's not the case. It just takes a bit of practice and being clear and building up to kind of the harder thing. So first of all, get clear on what you want. Potentially get some advice, right? If you want to do things yourself, then you can create a great job post. There's loads of, good examples. Check out jobrack.eu, for instance, and you can see some good examples. We've got some guides there as well. So that can help you kind of craft a job post, which needs to be not just about what you want, but about what they want as well. So you've kind of, at that stage, you know what you want to do. You've kind of prepared a bit of a job post. Then you've got to figure out, well, where do you go and actually advertise? Or how do you find the people? And that is, a lot of it's going to be down to, do you have any particular time zone requirements? Have you got any particular skills or language requirements? Or do you just want, the best possible people you can for, a sensible amount of money? And obviously, you and I know that, if that's the case, then it's Eastern Europe is the place to head to. But yeah, I think you've got to kind of just think about what you want, what restrictions are there that might kind of mean that you need to go to a particular kind of place. If you need a native English copywriter or kind of content writer, then that's going to limit you a little bit more than if you need someone to be in a let's say you want a virtual assistant to help you negotiate with Chinese manufacturers, then that person's probably going to be in China. So it's thinking through those kind of things. And then there's a wealth of kind of resources and places that you can get help from in terms of actually posting an ad. And then crucially, decide actually, do you want to do this yourself, or do you actually want to get someone to do it for you and kind of take all the kind of the hard work of hiring off your plate?
That's a really good point, because I actually dread hiring. For me, the hiring process usually takes about 6 weeks to post the ad, give it enough time for people to respond, because you think, oh, I'm going to get all the responses in the first hour, and you always fall in love with the first candidate, but you never hire the first candidate. And then there's this whole process. And so that's why I have just gotten burned out on doing this. I'm like, oh, that's why sometimes when it's a rough employee, I'm like, I don't know if I want to let this person go, because I don't want to go through the hiring process again, because getting that right person does take time. One other challenge that I've faced, as you know, we've talked about this personally, is that every book I read about company management and leadership, and I read them all, acts like you get lifetime employees. Like if I hire someone, they're going to be there for 30 years. Like, oh, the first 3 months you're just training. The first 6 months you're just getting to know each other. That's not our generation. In my 20s, I went through 5 or 6 jobs, and everyone I know now switches jobs every 6 months or a year, often not because they hate their job, just because they want to try something new, or they're bored, or they're just looking for that next adventure. It's not even always chasing a higher pay rate. So how long should someone expect their first employee to last? And what are some things they can do to make the relationship last longer? Or should we just have the expectation of the shorter relationships these days?
Yeah, so we definitely don't need to have the kind of expectation of a short relationship, but you do have to work at it to, encourage them to stay and kind of make sure that they're kind of growing and kind of, giving them more opportunity. Most people want that. Like I said, most people don't want to be doing the same thing day in, day out for forevermore. So in terms of kind of how long should you expect? I mean, let's say it's a virtual assistant helping take things off your plate. If you hire well and you focus on someone that wants to be an assistant, not someone that's just doing this because they see it as their route into like their first remote job, for instance. If you hire someone that wants to do it, then, a year, 2 years or more is very, very possible. And that's definitely what we focus on, right? But it's the key is focusing and finding someone that actually wants to do the things that you want to do, rather than someone that just sees it as an easy way to make some dollars, working remotely. And that's kind of really key. I listened to a Delegate and Done workshop by Ramit Sethi recently, and that was a big thing he made. He said, if you're looking for a high-level virtual assistant, focused on someone that wants to be a virtual assistant. And we've got fantastic people that, are at the early stage of their career. We've got people that, want to do this for lifelong. Ultimately, it all comes down to you giving them a bit of a variety of what things that they can get stuck into, and slowly, give them more and more responsibility. But the crucial thing is, onboard them fast, right? With any hire, the quicker you onboard them, the better job that they can do and the faster they can help you. And the key thing there is just about being organized, investing your time in them. And, just really kind of the hiring's the hard bit, but it's just the first hard bit, because then you've actually got to keep them and communicate with them and learn to delegate to them. And so, communication is definitely probably the most important thing.
That's something really good, because it kind of leads to what I was talking about at the beginning, when you kind of give someone a amorphous idea of what you want them to do. Like, run my social media channels. And if you aren't really specific, like I had a meeting with my social media manager yesterday, and I said, you're not hitting your metrics. And he goes, well, how do I know? And I said, well, we have the metric software, which you have to log into, which you're supposed to track. And I looked in our scheduling software, and they're both empty. He's like, well, we didn't have any good content. I was like, well, your entire job is to publish content. So if there's no content, then why do I have you? And because I gave him very clear metrics. The first day I hired him, I said, the only thing I'm going to look at is, first, I'm going to look at growth. So if we have a ton of new followers, we're getting a ton of engagement, a ton of clicks from Instagram, then I'm not going to check your work. If I'm not seeing that, I'm going to go into all the schedulers and see if stuff is going on. If we're not putting out content on the schedule we established, it's binary. Either you did it or you didn't. I can very easily measure it. It's an easy way to assess, because I can tracking. And I think that's an important element, is that when you hire your first person, sometimes you're so afraid of hurting their feelings. You either don't give them very clear goals, or you're afraid to use any type of tracking metric. Like many remote employees, I use a software called Time Doctor that remotes people's screens. And every time I hire someone in the process, I put in my ads, I always say we use screen tracking. I want someone up front. We have to do it, because it's the same thing as having a manager walk around the floor of the office, around the cubicles. And whenever someone says to me, oh, I want to do it, but I only want to manually put in my time, or I don't want to do screenshots, that to me, that's an instant, we're not working together. That's someone just saying, oh, I'm going to steal from you. That's what I hear. What do you think about that part of the process? How can someone put their systems in place, the right kind of tracking, and have that right mindset of, it's not that I don't trust an employee, it's creating an environment for me where there's not the risk of miscommunication. Because I know if someone's tracking their own time and they work 52 minutes, they're going to round that up. And they're going to say it was an hour, or they're going to round it up even by a minute. And that adds up. And when I look at their work, if I can't see it in my time tracker, I could think that they're up to something. Whereas if I can see in the time tracker they're really doing it, it took too long, then I know it's a different problem, then I can actually correct it.
Yeah, so I think there's a few things here. So one is, I am a big fan of time tracking software. Ironically, I don't use it to track time. So in the conventional way, because I want to kind of trust but validate in a sense. It's similar to your approach, right? So we have it because we want to know what people are spending their time on, because that's how we can identify efficiencies. That's how we know whether we're profitable, things like that. But the team do know that actually if we ever have any cause to look at it and we look at it and it's not what we expect, then we're going to assume the worst because that's all you can do. We're doing a lot of work around KPIs and metrics at the moment. So as we've grown, we've kind of tripled our team in the last kind of 8 months. And we are now putting in employee scorecards that we're using for monthly reviews. People have got individual KPIs and they know that, these are the key numbers that they're responsible for, that they're kind of gunning for. And that's very linked to like business metrics as well. And so, it's not the only thing we have, but it is something that we're being really clear with people because, the danger when you have a small team is it's a lovely place to work, right? And you're very chill and you're very relaxed and you're all having fun. And it's like, yeah, but we're a business as well. And actually having a bit of hustle and a bit of pace within a business is really, really good fun. And so actually just driving that a little bit, kind of maturing that bit, I think is really key. And you can do that from the very start. So knowing, like you said, with your social media manager, you know what the metrics are for that role. When it's someone to be your assistant and taking tasks off your plate, that can be a little bit harder, in terms of what should those metrics be. So one of mine is, kind of around, there's a quality metric a little bit. So I only want to explain things once or twice, right? Once I've explained it and it's an accepted thing, it should be getting done right then every time. We have SOPs and guides in place for that. So I think the vast majority of people are absolutely trustworthy. I'm all for giving a bit of flexibility. I think time tracking can be useful because it supports invoicing, things like that. And just setting clear expectations, setting clear expectations about what it is you want, when you're expecting to be online and available to you, when you want them to check in, saying hello at the start and the end of the day, things like that.
You brought up a couple of big terms I want to make sure our audience knows what they mean. A KPI is a key performance indicator. And what I like to do, what I've learned, and this is over the last few years, I've gotten better and better hiring, is that if you can tell someone, at the end of the week, this is the number I look at to see if you did your job. For example, one of the big events we do is we run promotions to other authors, and I measure how many people participate in one of those events. So I'll look at the end, run the numbers and say, how many people encountered this event? How many new visitors? How many attendees? And if that number is really low, well, then I look at, how many authors did we get? Then I look at, how many did we outreach to? And I start going deeper and deeper. But that first metric, if the first metric is good, if your result is good, then nothing else matters, right? Because you've hit that main metric. And so that's the first thing, right? Having one thing that each person knows, this is what I'm going to get measured for, whether it's the number of posts they put out per week or the number of engagements they get or the number of new followers. That's one thing. And then the other thing you mentioned, SOP, very important, is the standard operating procedure, which the best way to do this that I learned is that everything I do, I record it in a Loom video, and then I have someone on my team turn that into a PDF with screenshots of each step so that someone has an instruction manual. And the really great thing is when you can get your employees to make their own SOPs so that when they leave or they get promoted, which happens in my team, then the next person has that instruction manual. So those are really great things you brought up. I just want to make sure some of our audience, they're hiring the first person, they're very new, and they go, I know the first time I saw that, I've heard it called KPIs, I've also heard it called rocks, where it's like, well, everyone's in charge of one metric, they track. So you're hiring your first new person, and you talked about it's a really chill place. And that's a really good thing you bring up. My first team that I built around 8 years ago, I told everyone, your family, we're all in it together. And one of my employees was working 30 minutes a week and billing me for 40. And he was like, how can you fire me? When I caught him, I was like, well, you're straight up stealing from me. It's like, guess what? My sister did that to me. She'd be fired too. And I had this idea because we create what we think is the perfect workplace. And I do think that there's a lot of really bad literature out there. A lot of the books out there about leading companies and leading teams are very, very misleading because they're built on the employee mindset of the 1960s, where when someone got their job, they worked at that company for 40 years. We don't see that now. We don't even see CEOs who stay with the same company for 40 years. Everyone job hops. And so that's sometimes I read those books and I feel really bad Like when you said, oh, a virtual assistant can stay, I was like, please don't say 10 years. Please don't say 10 years. Because I was like, oh my gosh, no one stays with me for 10 years. But yeah, that's what I found. 2 years is kind of my sweet spot. I originally was at 6 months. I had a lot of 6-month turnover, but now almost all my employees have been with me for 2 years. In fact, I got a message from another employee a couple of days ago. He's like, it's time for my 2-year raise. And I was like, oh, well, I guess it's been 2 years, which is good. I was like, wow, it's been 2 years. That's amazing. So it is being aware of that. So how can people prepare themselves for the onboarding process? What's that like? How long should it take? What should they have ready in advance? And how can they tell if the person is living up to expectation? Like if I hire someone, should they be 100% as good as me, 80% as good as me, 120% as good as me? What's the number to look for? Like what's the dream?
Yeah, so some of that depends on the tasks you're going to get them to do. But in general, so in terms of preparing for the onboarding, know what it is that you want them to do. Have a list of kind of like, well, what are the tasks? And, be sensible about how quick you can onboard some of these things. Because some of it's going to be your own capacity to take questions, to explain it, to do the Loom videos like you talked about. So anything that you can do in advance so that when they start, they've got stuff to be just digging into, right? So for instance, you record a bunch of Loom videos on how to do something. They can be creating the SOPs. They can watch you do them. They can start doing them for the first times. You want to make sure that any systems access they need. So let's say you're using a password manager like LastPass or 1Password, that they've got access to the passwords they need, that you've created them an email account so that they can, create documents, share documents. This isn't the time to go cheap on it, right? So this is definitely the time to give them a proper, at your company email address, not let them use their own Gmail account, because then, if they do move on at some stage, then you've got their emails, right? You've got their access to their files, things like that. So that's kind of super simple things to do to get started. Plan your time, right? Have time in your diary for, let's say it's an hour or a couple of hours on the first day, and then gradually reducing down, but a little bit of time every day goes a long way to kind of just being able to say, hey, have they got any questions? What's the next things they're going to work on? And build out from there. In terms of how long it should take, depends on the complexity. If they're just coming in to do kind of a couple of things, like let's say social media posts, it could be really, really quick, just like a day or so. If you've got a list, I was chatting to someone yesterday, he's got 85 tasks he wants to delegate. That's probably going to take a few weeks for them to build up and kind of like delegate all those down. You might start doing a few a day. And some of that's going to be your capacity to, kind of onboard, explain, things like that. But you want it done right. And then in terms of efficiency, my aim is that the tasks that I'm delegating down, I want them to be done as well as I can do them, near enough from the second or third time they're being done. Because it's kind of like I almost say pass or fail. It's not about have they done it gold standard? Well, no, because I don't do stuff to a gold standard. If I need I need a laundry collection arranging, right? Or if I need an office booking, or I need some travel plans doing, they've either done it right or they haven't done it right. And so I see it very much kind of almost a lot more binary of just saying, hey, I'm expecting them. We've agreed the process that we've trained. They've said, yes, they understand it and they're happy. Once they've said, yes, they're happy, then I'm expecting it to just be done correctly.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we forget to check for when we're hiring is there's like 3 levels. There's someone who can do a task with very clear instructions. There's someone who can be a little bit of a free thinker and they can a little bit think about the box, have a little bit of activity. And then there's the person who can actually write SOPs and come up with new ideas and implement. And I think sometimes we try to hire the third category all the time. And I can tell you one of the things I used to always try to hire for intelligence. I have some employees who are not high in that metric, but they're also so good at the specific tasks I give them. I had someone working on a task last week that I couldn't do. I failed at. I tried to do it. It's a repetitive task, a research task. I couldn't find a good result. And he sent me 25 really good results in a couple of hours. And I was like, man, this so good at this one thing. And I think that's the thing is that to put people in the right role, I had him doing the wrong tasks for a while, but now anytime a client comes and goes, hey, I want to find 100 people that fit this category, I can put him on, and he comes up with that spreadsheet every time. Sometimes I have to tell him where to look. I'll say, oh, try this website or that website, and he goes to the races. But he could never do that higher level creative thinking, but he's so good in his task. And it's like a train. You put a train in the right direction, it always gets to the station. And I think that's an important lesson is that we're not looking for a me, because I would never work for me, right? I would never want to be in the employee role. What we're looking for is someone who, once you know what the task is, you find someone, what's the right skill set for that task. Now, I want to jump back one step. I realize we got into the onboarding process, but when someone's in the hiring process and through the onboarding process, what are red flags that when they see them, they should immediately pull out? Like I had an employee, someone I hired, might have even told you the story, but I hired him and the very first day, he started sending all these really aggressive emails, being like, well, where's my contract? Where are these other things? He's like, I expect a written contract sent to my country from your lawyer. I'm like, well, we don't have a lawyer. I don't have that many employees. I have sub 20 employees. We don't have a legal team. We don't have an HR team. We have a small team. And that immediately, or there's the person who doesn't show up on the first day and then shows up on the second day. So those are obvious ones. But what are some other signs, either in the early hiring process all the way through the onboarding period, where you should eject immediately?
So if when you schedule an interview with them, if their camera doesn't work, right, or they don't come on camera, right, stop straight away, reschedule the interview. If they do it a second time, ditch them. Right, there is zero reason these days for why someone can't come on video. Literally zero, right? If their laptop camera's not working, they can use their phone, right? So video is the number one, right? You got to see the person, because from time to time it does happen that people will, impersonate and say that they're from a particular place when they're not. So video is number one. When they come into the onboarding side of things, if, what I'm a big fan of, like, give them some videos to watch and then ask them some questions. If they're asking you questions that have been covered in the video, right? A few questions might be fine, but actually if they're repeatedly doing it, it's like, are they actually paying attention? Have they got the attention to detail that you need? I'm a big fan of hiring, the kind of people that I tend to hire is I want them to be able to pick up projects and kind of bigger tasks for me. So I'm hiring for what a friend of mine calls the A2 FSOs, the ability to figure stuff out. And, like I said, sometimes with your spreadsheet guys, sometimes you don't need that, right? But a lot of the time, if you kind of don't have a significant team, then that's the kind of thing you want. You don't want to have to think, right, I need to prescriptively document everything. So, yeah, do they come on? If they don't come on video, red flag, move away. If they're not paying attention to things, if they're not having that attention to detail. One of my pet hates is when I ask someone to create a document and share a link with me, if they don't either set it as an open access link, if it's non-sensitive, which is what I tell them to do, or they haven't shared with me and they send me the link and I can't access it, it's almost immediate termination, right? Because it's the most annoying thing on the planet. And
it's
I go
so common,
to,
though.
Oh, it's so common. And it's just like, come on.
Like 50%.
So things like, yeah, I have no time for it. And the other one for me is like, I go to some degree to train people how to work with me, right? I'm a bit eccentric. So for instance, if you want to ask me a question, that's cool. But do it in a single Slack message, right? Don't say, hey, Noel, can I ask you a question? And then in individual messages, because I've been disturbed by the hey, Noel. Then I'm watching the, XYZ is typing prompt, waiting for the next thing. And it's like, can I ask you a question? So I'm like, no, just give it to me in one message, nice and clearly. So be clear about what you want. And then if they don't follow those things, they're the kind of red flags for me.
I think that's really good because that points out you have a different communication style to me. Like that wouldn't bother me. I have it set up, but I also, if they send me a message, they shouldn't expect an immediate response. For example, I'm on this call with you right now. I'm not checking my team messages. And I have that expectation, but I do expect them always to respond within 24 hours. That's kind of what I've set up. So if they've written that longer message, I'll see it all at once. But that's really good. It's interesting that you mentioned, I can't tell you how many people, this is why I don't think anyone should use Google Drive, because they send me that link and it's almost always 90% of the time it's locked. Or especially, I've never had a web developer or send me a link to the websites they've worked on and at least one wasn't dead. I've never seen that. I've never seen it where they're all active links. And I think to me, again, it's the same thing. It's a massive red flag when there's parts of your resume that are broken. And I've seen this on Upwork profiles, and I've seen this everywhere I've ever worked with anyone who does web design. There are always links to dead websites. That's easy to check because you just click each link. And if it says 404, take that off your resume. So I think that's a really good point. One of the things that I do, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is I'll ask someone, ask them like a series of 3 questions in the early part of the interview process and the email part before the interview. And then I'll say, do you have any questions for me? Or I'll say, can you ask 3 questions for me? And what I look for are questions that are like, how much money will I make? When is my first vacation? Or how do you deal with a problem employee? If they say things like that, or how do you deal with an employee who pushes back? And I'm like, it's a little early in the game to do pushback. To me, those are big red flags. Well, I'm looking for someone who actually visited my website or ask specific questions about, what are the other people I'm going to work with be like? What's the company culture like? What kind of projects will I be working on? Those questions I like, but when I hear questions like, well, do I have to work in a specific time zone? That's answered, first of all, in my job posting. Because you even know that because I post like 50 jobs on your platform. So you've seen that. Like that's always in my posting. Anything that's in the posting that they don't notice, I don't like. Or if they're asking questions that tell me that they're really not caring about the company, they just want any job, not this job. That's kind of what I'm looking for in that screening process. What do you think about that part of it?
Yeah, so definitely agree. I always like to see good questions from them, without a doubt. Do they really care? Are they really interested? And I think the one danger, though, from employers a lot of the time is that they can expect too much too early, right? So when you're in the interview, you can definitely, it's perfectly reasonable to expect that they've had a little bit of look at your site and they've got some good questions for you. I see employers that, in the application form, they want tons and tons and tons of detail and they, tell me why you're really excited to work for my company. And at that point, you are probably one of 10 people that they've applied to, because lots of employers don't even respond to candidates, which is really, really poor. And so it's about kind of like managing your expectations at each stage of the process. But yeah, when you're at interviews, you want someone that's interested, that's awake, that's, kind of excited to be joining for you, and that it is an exciting opportunity to join them. Even if you're not excited by the particular things that you're delegating down, you want someone that really gets into research or spreadsheets or, organizing and kind of like organizing the CEO's life, things like that.
And I think as well is that as you hire more employees, you realize that different personalities fit different types of jobs. My experience has been people who are good at SEO are very standoffish. There's a reason SEO people are like kept in the basement, like IT. I hired an amazing SEO through your platform who got poached by a massive company who offered her a huge amount of money because she was way too good for my team. She was so standoffish. Everyone's like, she's so rude. And I was like, that's basically what you get with SEO people. Like, I expect that. Just like I expect copywriters to always be weird when you talk, but really good in writing. What kind of expectations, how can you figure out if someone has the right personality for a job? Like they say, oh, when you hire a salesperson, you want a salesperson that you find a little bit annoying because they'll push harder in sales. I don't know that I like that. Like, I want to hire someone who's annoying, but I've seen that taught. What do you think about the personality stuff? Because I've seen people, they're really obsessed with a DISC score or the Myers-Briggs test or the Colors one now. There's a new one called Colors.
Yeah,
how much does that personality stuff matter?
So I use the personality stuff to provoke good conversation in interview. So as whenever we always test our candidates when they're kind of applying for roles with us. And one of the things, it'll be, hey, head to 16personalities.com and just do the quick personality test. And I don't really care what it says. What I want to do is then discuss it with them and say, hey, what did you think about it? Do you agree with it? Do you not agree with it? What do you disagree with off the profile? And it's just about self-awareness. And that's generally what I'm looking for. I am less worried about specific personality types for specific roles, but I've got to be able to get on with them, right? And by that is communicate effectively. I need to be able to feel that they can, give me some pushback and kind of challenge me, but also that I can challenge them and we can have a good, kind of constructive debate and discussion on something. Not that, they're going to be too fragile or, they're going to be too like opinionated to even listen and actually hear kind of feedback. So they're the kind of things I'm looking for. I'm really looking for, right, what are the kind of people that fit in? I'm doing some work at the moment around values, what's important to us, a job rack, and what the most important things. And for me is like energy is like number one, right? So when I do if either see a video or I jump on a quick screening call, I'm looking to say, are they awake? Do they feel alive? And that's what I'm looking for. I'm a very energetic person. I always want that in every kind of person. Some will have it, less than others, right? So your average developer is headphones on, cranking out code, right? Your average kind of, virtual assistant or kind of customer support person is going to be a bit bouncier and more lively. But there's a kind of a non-negotiable minimum for me that I'm always looking for.
What do you think about, there's another test that I've done recently. Again, I got this from a friend of mine who's been really good at hiring, is that there's a 12-minute IQ test you can take online for free. I forget the name of it. I have it written down. And what I say to someone is like, hey, I need you to shoot a video of you taking the test. And this is because if you haven't taken a screenshot, people will mess with the screenshot. And so you have them do the video. And I don't actually even care about the score of the test so much as if they can find it, which you can if you just copy and paste what I wrote into Google, you'll find the test. It's free. It takes 12 minutes. And then if they can successfully record it, like a screen capture of 12 minutes and send it to me. Like, I'm testing these other things. And of course I look at the score as well a little bit, and I took it myself. It is nerve wracking to try and do like a 12-minute test. You see the clock going, I get it. I did it myself, even recorded myself so I could see what it felt like. So I'm asking people to do it. And it's amazing to me, the number of people that can't successfully do that. So I can then just look at the people who are able to do this task, which is important because I send a huge amount of video communication to my team. I probably record 20 Loom videos a week. Because when someone asks a question, I can shoot a Loom video, and this is a very good practice for SOPs, and then I can reuse it on the next time someone asks that question. So now I have like this massive list of answers to questions, and then we put them in project management software. So what other types of tests or questions do you think someone should ask as part of their process?
So when we're doing a test like that, we do the same as you. So we will ask things like, So here's the 5 test tasks that we'd like you to think about. We'd like you to respond with a Google Doc and put all of your answers and all of your work into the Google Doc. Please ensure you share it with an open link and reply with an email with this subject, to us. So we're looking, can they create a Google Doc? Can they share a link with it that's open access? Can they put the subject line in the email? Okay. How do they communicate in the email? Do they actually format it nicely and, address it, semi-professionally? So there's all things like that. And we're just looking to see how easy is it to communicate with them? Because any team member, you want it to be easy, right? If it feels a bit painful and you're in the hiring process, it's not going to get any easier once you've hired them. So you want to basically just to feel like it's enjoyable communicating with them.
There's this challenge when someone seems really good at the core task, or they seem like great on paper, but then all these other little things happen and you get into what I call the negotiation phase, where you go, yeah, it's really annoying, but maybe this was a one-time thing. Like you start doing that, kind of like when you're in a bad relationship where you go, maybe she's just bad at first dates. Maybe the second date will be really good. Oh, she's mean on second dates too, but she's going to get nicer. Can't get meaner, right? And you start to get emotionally invested. One of the things that I started to do was have someone else on my team do the first interview, because if I like someone, that will affect hiring them, even though it doesn't really matter because I'm not friends with my employees. We're not doing video calls all the time like besties, right? The longest video call I do is usually the interview with someone. So I know that about myself, is that if I like someone, I'll want to hire them even if someone's better. And then also we do that thing where they're not, so that way I'll hire someone who's not as good, but I like them, or we can have someone they're probably good at the job, but there will be friction. Now for me, the most important thing to me is I don't want to work with people I don't like. Like everyone on my team right now, I like. I don't have anyone on the team I dislike. We actually lost a few people before the new year, and that was good because they were causing the main friction. And when they were gone, yeah, less work was getting done, but my stress level went down. So I usually the way I assess my team is how annoyed I am when I'm doing payroll. And if paying someone annoys me, I go, then I shouldn't have them here. So right now when I process payroll, I don't feel bad about I'm not annoyed by anyone. So that's one of the ways I measure. I don't know if everyone else does that. That's a personal thing for me.
Yeah, that's an unusual one. I've not heard of that before. Generally, I want to feel good when we're on our team meeting, we're on calls, things like that. I want to feel good, then it's enjoyable. I want to feel pleased when I'm looking at the work they're doing, just to feel good. And then, so during the hiring process, right, if you're someone like you that kind of almost like love at first sight, right, and then you want to jump into the first one, then get someone else to do it for you, right? Or, we have a service where we do exactly that for you, right? We can, we handle the hiring process, and it's, helps to stop you kind of either getting weary of, oh God, I've got so many candidates to review, or getting kind of sucked in, because there's some really good people out there that are great at interviews, but that just aren't actually good at the job. And it's kind of just getting down into that. And some of that is, I've got one friend that does really, really long interviews because people can only keep up a pretense for so long. I'm not a fan of that approach. I like to just go kind of quite hard on the interview, really dig in. What happened? Tell me about that. Tell me, how did you deal with that? How did you feel? Really kind of digging in. But, generally, like I said, vast majority of people are trustworthy and can do what they say they can do. And you can identify it very quickly in that test task. If the test task that they do for you doesn't make you feel good, then just kind of trust your instinct.
I love that topic there of the test task. This is something that most new hires don't know about or don't think of. So I'll tell you about a couple of mine. I have a video editor on my team. If you read his profile, nothing about video. His entire profile was a general virtual assistant. And I basically, to every single person who applied, I sent them the same, I think it's a 30 to 40 second video clip from a video that I posted years ago. And I say, this is the video I've already posted. Your work, we're not going to reuse the work. This is a test. This should take you less than an hour. Edit it and make it look. And here's a bunch of my other videos. And in the link, actually, they can actually see the other version we published of it a long time ago to see what we did with the previous video editor. And I'm looking, I believe that the task should be 1 hour or less. I don't ask people for a task longer than that. And I will ask, and I'll look to see whose video looks the best. And I never read, until after I'd hired him, I didn't read what his profile said, because I just looked, he applied for a video job and he did the best video by a country mile. And he was like, oh, I'm not even a video guy. I'm like, no, you are. You are now, because your test was the best one. So I put a lot of weight into the test. And the same thing when I'm hiring a researcher, we do a lot of cold outreach through my own particular process. It's different than everyone else's. So I say, here's the process. Here's a training video. It's about a 5-minute video. Make a spreadsheet of how many contact emails you can find using this process in an hour. And I say, tell me how long it took you. And so most people take 20 minutes to learn the process, 40 minutes to do it. And the average person turns in 20 contacts. I've had people turn in 8 or 4. And I'm like, what happened here? And then one of the people on my team, she turned in 40. I was like, okay. And now she's the leader of her team. So I think the tests are so important. How can someone develop a test, and how hard should it be? I know there are certain people who think, and I understand this, when they're being hired, they think, oh, you're trying to get free work out of them. Like I've known authors who send 12 different chapters to 12 editors for a test, which is unethical, of course. How can you get more people to do the test and realize you're not trying to get free work out of them? And at the same time, then you can really get that sense of what to measure. So how can someone develop those tests?
Yeah, the simplest way is to offer to, on the kind of the goodwill side, is just to offer to pay, right? Especially if you're hiring a virtual assistant that's, not going to be on a huge hourly rate. It's not very expensive to offer to pay in the first place. So that can kind of help one way. And we often say, hey, if you'd like to be paid for your time, we're happy to offer a gesture, right? And it doesn't need to even be the hourly rate. It's just a gesture. So that, just kind of show that, you are taking it seriously. In terms of how to develop the test, use the tasks that you want them to do, right? So for me, if they're going to be doing travel arrangements, and it's great with the kind of the COVID side of things, because it's complicated. So you can say, hey, I'm going to be traveling to Bulgaria, then I'm going to come back to London for one night, then I'm going to fly out to Mexico, and then I'm going to fly back to London after 2 weeks. Tell me what I need to do to comply with the COVID testing and regulations, etc. If they're going to be doing social media posts, say, hey, give me 5 examples of a post that you might put on our Facebook page to our Facebook group on a Monday morning, for instance. So that means that they've got to go and research, and you kind of start to get a feel from that. But the main thing is, use the kind of things that you want them to do. If it's a project manager, you might say things like, tell me how you would, coming in, you're going to take over some existing projects, tell me how you would audit the project and, know what state it's in at the point you're handing it over. So whatever it is, just think about the task you want them to do and then give them a scenario of that. So, let's say travel arrangements, right? You want to get a train somewhere, you want to get a flight somewhere, get them to kind of look it up and give you some options and just see how they do it, what questions they ask you, things like that. And just keep it nice and simple. Like you said, up to an hour or so of work, maybe 3 or 4 little things. They can be quite small, and it's looking around the edges. How do they communicate? Do they ask you any questions? So for instance, if you set them the COVID travel arrangements one, do they come back to you and say, are you vaccinated? Right? Have you had 2 jabs or have you had 3? All that kind of stuff. So just keep it pretty simple, but use real work. I'm not a big fan of these like generic test platforms that do, typing tests or English tests. It's much more about how do they actually do the things you want to do.
Yeah, I think that's a really great piece of advice, because I've had people who are great at other companies, but what I do is very unique. And someone who works for me might not be good at working with me because your business is very different to mine. And so that's important to understand. We all have a different company culture. We all have a different communication style. We all have a different way that we want them to ask questions. So that's a really great to give them a test. That's a real task you would assign them. And that's exactly why I've been given the same video task. We hired a second video person, give him the same test as I gave the first guy, and I had him judge all the applicants. I said, here's yours from 5 years ago. I kept it. Judge everyone else's. Who's as closest to yours, or who do you think you can train to be good, do our style? I think that's really, really wonderful. And it's been amazing. Thank you so much for giving your time. I know it's really valuable. I'd like to ask you one final question as we wind down. If you could go back in time to before you hired your very, very first person, what advice would you give that younger version of yourself?
Hire more people faster. I think that'll be that's the main thing, because that's what's driven growth. With the first person, I think, trust your instincts, right? At that person, the very first person I hired for JobRack, I needed someone that could be like a jack of all trades, right? And do all kinds of different stuff. And so energy and passion were more important than kind of deep skills. So just recognizing what it is you need and what's important to you, and kind of keep communicating.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for giving your time. I know your time is very precious. Noel, your website is jobrack.eu. It's an amazing platform. Can you tell someone, I use it a lot, of course, but how is your platform different? Because there's so many hirings. What's the USP or what's unique about JobRack, and why is it such a wonderful platform?
Yeah, so the number one thing is that we are helpful and friendly. There's, like I said, there's tons of hiring platforms out there. There's tons of faceless hiring platforms out there. We pride ourselves on being helpful and friendly, so we will help you. Whether it's giving you some guidance about salary, giving you some guidance about how to write a job post, jumping on a call with you to chat about the kind of tasks you want to kind of delegate and outsource. We are there, and I've got a whole team and myself. We're there to kind of help you. Whether that's just giving you some free advice, or whether that's actually taking over the hiring process for you and saving you time and effort and energy. We can we're helpful and friendly.
That's definitely absolutely true. I know that when I first started posting jobs, I had some trouble getting applicants, and you guys got me a whole bunch and you showed me how to do that. So now when I post, I get almost too many applicants. So that's absolutely true. Thank you so much for spending your time. It's been amazing having you here. Thank you so much, Noel.
No worries, Jonathan. Great to chat.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. I am passionate about product creation, and it doesn't have to be hard. Let me help you break through the most common myths that stop people from creating a product and show you how to make your first product in an afternoon at servemaster.com/myth.